perfect organism.
The Alien Saga Podcast.
Really, why we're here tonight is we want to check in to see how everyone is doing in terms of quarantine and the crazy world that we live in, like you mentioned earlier, Patrick. But I'm also curious, what are people thinking about a sequel to Alien Covenant? What would that look like for each of you? Do we continue on the path we're on? Do we keep David but change course? Is the Covenant / prequel era over? What do you guys think?
I have some ideas. If anyone wants to hear,
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
Personally, I think that we're likely to see Ridley get one more film, and obviously David is going to be, the star of it. I personally, and this is not from any insider information or anything, so please nobody attribute that to this. I personally think that they're not going to make it clear that David created or didn't create the alien, because I think there was a big backlash about that idea. I think that they're just going to leave you confused on it. Is what I think is going to happen. And I'm hoping beyond anything that David is not the engineer that we see in the first movie in 1979, that he's not in that suit sitting there on LV-426.
There will be some continuity issues. I
hope that they don't actually even crash on LV-426 in the third prequel, if there is one. Like, I feel like it maybe needs to be another planet or J6 or whatever planet that they want to come up with. I feel like it would be a better idea if they leave the mythology of the original Alien film completely alone.
Yeah, have it let it be its own self-contained story. I agree.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind what they like. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm gonna say I might as well go. For me, for a follow-up, I'm gonna cheat and do two answers. I think, like Jaime, you mentioned before, I think it could work continuing the story if instead of focusing on the bootleg Blade Runner story and getting it more on Alien and the horror, like instead of like in Covenant where they skipped all the stuff to Shaw, if you do a Covenant sequel, you show all the experimenting on the colonists and whatnot, show all the body horror, make us terrified, make us wince, make us, anxious. I think if you focus on that, I think it could work. But other than that, I think if this doesn't continue, do some sort of reboot and set it either between Aliens and Alien 3 or after Alien 3, because as we've discussed before, there's so much to play within this universe, from Weyland-Yutani to Rivals to everything. There's plenty of room to keep the series going without retreading the same type of characters. I think it'll work either way. That's what I would like to see, at least.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I have to agree. Like, I personally don't care. I don't care for as much as what happens as like something has to happen, because it at the end of Covenant, it left you like you're kind of lost right now. You're sort of in a funk, because as fans, like, I want nothing more than to find out, okay, what happened. And we're kind of like, we're just sort of treading water right now. And that's the most frustrating thing. But I mean, me personally, I want to find out I've never been a big fan of the Android sort of line. I came into the whole aliens thing as more for the creatures. Like, David's lab was incredible. I mean, that for me is my big thing, because the experimenting and all that kind of stuff. So I'm never really was into it that way. And then there's just something about Prometheus into Covenant that really kind of was like a hook, line, and sinker to get me back into the franchise. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of it, you see what happens at the end of Covenant, and then it's just stopped. And now we're kind of in this free fall where, like, as fandom, we have no idea, honestly, it's like, it bugs me and it hurts, because like I want to see what happens next so badly that it's frustrating. I agree with Jaime too. I mean, I don't know if actually, I think it was Andrew said it. Like, I do not want to find out that David is the one in the spaceship. I take them somewhere totally different, and then Alien can have its own beginnings and everything like that. But we just need something. I mean, they have to do something here soon, or else you're really going to have too much time in between, and you're going to lose a lot of your, the people that are holding on. But I mean, that's my take on that.
I have a somewhat unpopular, probably opinion, not opinion, but how do I say this? Opinion on how the studios look at this. That's the best way to describe it. I think the reason why a lot of this toxic fandom has come out is because people don't think that these things are being made for them. And I really don't think, I think that's correct. I don't think the studio is making it for the fans. They're making them these movies for two reasons. One, Ridley found something he wants to say, which may not be what we want to hear. But it's entertaining at least, because David is awesome as far as I'm concerned. And they want to reach as many new audience members as possible. And I think in the process of this, a lot of the hardcore fans feel left out of a lot of things. And it's one of the things I tried to do with the RPG book is there's hints for threads for things that didn't happen in the movies in there. Like there's a hint for a thread for the William Gibson thing to cover all the aspects of the things that I know fans love that have sort of been abandoned or forgotten about and whatnot. But Hollywood, at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is they're looking to find as many movie tickets as possible. And that may not necessarily have anything to do with the series' actual fan base.
But what's interesting about that you say, though, is if that's true, it's still not working.
Oh, I know. Covenant didn't do what they wanted it to do. And I think there's a lot of awesome things about Covenant. I got to go to Alien Day before Covenant came out, and we saw the original Alien in HD, and then they played all the internet Covenant stuff, followed by just the scene of the
backburster.
Yeah, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's terrifying!" Out of context, without knowing the rest of it, I was like, that thing fucking scared me. And, I felt like, all right, we're good. We're on track, but then, there are things where it wasn't on track. But one of the beauties of the franchise is that, each of the movies is different. It, in some ways, drastically on some of them. But they're all sort of telling a different type of film, a different type of story. So they're not really repeating themselves, even though, our hero, the alien, shows up in each one of them.
Yeah, I think that's probably controversial. I think that in some ways you have a character like Daniels, who's largely forgettable, who is certainly a character built in the fashion of Ripley. If anything, I think Shaw was probably a better attempt at someone a little bit different, even if she wasn't highly successful. In reference to Alien Day, I'll never forget, me and Dave both went and saw Alien on Alien Day, and we saw those scenes as well. And we, within probably 20, 30 minutes leaving the theater, we were like, holy shit, that was, I was disturbed. I was like, this is an alien film. Like, I will never forget that day. It was really, really, really amazing.
Fantastic, yeah.
I just wish they didn't show that. It was great to see it early, but arguably the best scene in the movie. Don't leak that early.
Yeah.
Even in the previews, there was so much given away. The whole Alien Covenant media frenzy. You might as well just release the movie on video on demand. It was relentless, and there was almost nothing there was very little to even surprise you. Like you watch the commercial. All right, this is where Oren bites it. Thanks a lot, Fox. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there was no mystery.
No,
which is
I have
almost.
Yeah, which defeats the whole purpose of the franchise.
Yeah.
You want to.
The whole first film was about mystery. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the studios in general are afraid no one's going to go see these things. So, and you see it in all the trailers. I don't watch movie trailers anymore.
You're better off. I usually just watch the one now. The teaser get me interested, then I just push everything else aside.
Yeah, I made sure I watched nothing for Rise of Skywalker. I was like, I'm not having this ruined for me in a trailer. And
Well, see how that.
what do you call it? I feel like I just loaded a gun. Should I not? Should I not run up Rise of Skywalker?
No, that'll
Oh, it's
that'll
fine.
push Jamie's buttons.
No, it won't. It's a terrible film, but yeah, whatever.
What do you,
Shut up, but go on.
I said I didn't want it ruined in a trailer. I didn't say anything about in the theater. No. Okay. Anyway, no, I actually really enjoyed Rise of Skywalker.
I did too.
What do you call it? But they put that best stuff in the trailer because they're like if people don't know this is there, they're not going to go see the movie. It's a self-defeating thing.
Yeah.
You know.
They got to go back to the way they used to do it. I can still remember as a kid going to see a trailer, because you'd always had them before social media and the internet. Trailers were on a VHS, like they were the beginning of it. That's how the only way you went to see it, or if you went to see it in the movie theater. I mean, that was the best part. And I can still remember I know to this day, there's movies that I saw trailers for, and some of those scenes were never in the movie. Which was crazy. And like I said, that's the biggest thing. I mean, you hit it on the head. It's the whole social media thing where we all live in and go by today. But yeah, I can remember that's what I did. I saw the Covenant. I watched the teaser trailer, and then I shut myself down from everything else before it came out because I just
Smart.
knew. And then I think didn't England get it before we did? Was it Europe got it before us? And then the next day
The film,
it was
yeah,
just
a
like
week.
you couldn't go on social media because everybody and their brother was telling about was telling what was going on. So like you were like constantly dodging, getting spoilers here and there. I mean that was in itself, I think, one of the downfalls.
Before we get too
thought-
far into I'm going to let you speak as well, Connor, and then we need to hear from Clara and Mike. Before we get too far into the trailer, because we want to make sure we're focusing on where this franchise is going to go. So let's see if we can keep that focus. But what I will say is, in terms of the next film, I really think we need someone, whether Ridley Scott is producing or not, I think we need someone who thinks the alien is scary and will present it as such. Because I think the alien is fucking scary. And I think it can be if someone's really interested in it being. And so I really feel like if they're going to make another movie called Alien whatever, I think it needs to be a film where someone doesn't feel burdened by the actual creature itself, which was clear. So I'm curious, like Connor, Clara, Mike, what do you guys think in terms of a sequel? What would you like to see?
I think they should put it on TV, like a series instead, with the way things are going right now, with pandemic and whatnot, what's happening in theatres. God knows when they'll be back up and running, if they will. And to be perfectly honest, I think you've got plenty of space within a TV series to tell whatever story you want. You're not constricted by an hour and a half or getting asses in seats. People binge watch series within 2 days, and it's like 20 hours worth of episodes. So I don't see what the issue is there.
I think the future of the series is going to have to work around what's currently happening in consideration to the pandemic. If you're going to cast an entire array of people for a film, they would have to self-isolate for months or years on end to be able to achieve that. And that depends on like how efficient production would be without having a lot of things at their disposal. Another option is actually going to an animated series, because people can record voices in their own home or at a studio, and then someone splice that together and produce something that people can consume. And that can be kind of done really without the budgetary limits that a major film production would have. And then you have the other option of like not even going to animation, but going to audio dramas, because we know how successful those were, especially with the Alien ones. They could consider going to an audio drama series, so they wouldn't have to worry about like the art department or pre-production in that sort of sense, but they can consider doing more with the sound design and investing a lot in character development and investing a lot in making us use our imaginations to kind of fill the gaps. I think that would be the most effective way going forward. And perhaps once all of this pandemic stuff is over, then they can look at finishing Ridley's prequel series and then branch off into either a television series, just like Connor said, because it'd be easier to be able to reach fans, especially us older crew who can't afford to go to the cinema all the time and pay $90 for a babysitter, to be able to kind of like connect with the sort of stuff that we love about Alien and have that instant to our home. And kind of like what I really loved about, for example, the Alien short films is that we were getting updates every week. We could talk about it. The fandom was getting really interactive. It was a fantastic time for us, I thought, even if we weren't exactly happy with the quality, but it was trying to tell a story. And I think that's what's important, and that's what keeps us going. So if we could start telling stories again without having to worry about continuity, tell separate stories in the universe, there's a massive timeline that can be taken up from anywhere. Let's start investigating alternate, timelines where, Blomkamp's film could have happened, or maybe all the prisoners didn't exactly die off and there was someone else hiding, and we could go back to Fiorina. They could pretty much write up anything. There's no limitation. I think the studios have to start taking risks, and that's where it has to start. The studio has to go, oh, the Alien fandom is worthwhile creating stuff for and investing in, but we shouldn't start investing in singular stories which only set us down one path, where we're going to leave 50% of fans unsatisfied and upset. Like, I'm okay with Ridley Scott finishing, but I'm also okay with a Colonial Marines TV series, or, an interactive game series, or a really integrated audio drama that's like serialized and released every week. Like, I would eat that stuff up. So yeah, I think they just have to open up more options instead of just going down the one possibility, which is just one more movie and then moving on.
Do you think that they need to just like that they need to keep moving to brand new directions, or like would you embrace a Hadley's Hope Netflix series or something? You know what I mean?
I think Hadley's Hope is played out. I think especially like having run Hope's Last Day, which was a lot of fun, that there is only one ending for that, right. And that's everyone dies and only a few survive, and I'm not happy with that. I want something different. I want something really groundbreaking. It makes the alien scary, but I also want a character that I'll be like, holy shit, I didn't expect them to survive. Like Alex White's The Cold Forge. Like, spoiler alert for people who haven't read the book yet, but oh my God, to have a person of color who's also, transhuman, who's also gay, to become like the sole survivor of a complete alien outbreak in a scientific laboratory scenario, that is amazing. I would love to see that on film. I would love to hear an audio drama. But the problem is the studios don't take that sort of risks with the mainstream stories that we have on screen. There was even like so much focus on the Walter David kiss more than the actual like content of about, the story of creation and what is it, why is creation also an abomination, and why there is so much suffering contained in that sort of theology. I just feel like the focus was too much on like, oh, it's a gay robot kiss scene. I mean, like, come on, guys, there's so much more happening. If they could just remove all of that other chaff and start focusing on the stories that take more risks, I think that we would have better stories, better support, better characters. Sorry for the rant.
No, don't apologize. Mike, I want to hear from you.
Well, I'm going to bring all the hate. I agree with everything everybody's saying, first of all. But I think to really breathe some life into the franchise, you kind of have to go big budget action movie. Shiny stuff, explosions, get people into the seats, into the theaters, breathe some money into the franchise before we can start going back to the movies that we want to see. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that's what has to happen right now. Just that everybody wants the shiny stuff and the explosions these days.
I think from a financial standpoint, I think you're absolutely right, Mike. I feel like there's no doubt that that's what would get butts in seats. There's no mystery why Blomkamp's concept artwork got so many shares and why it became such a huge thing. Like there's an enormous market of nostalgia out there, and especially hey, at a time like this when everybody's anxious and in unprecedented circumstances where nothing feels familiar anymore, that kind of shit, that kind of comfort food will go an extremely long way, especially if it's done really well,
Yeah.
financially, totally. Yeah.
That's what I've been escaping to, is just movies I really don't have to think about too much because I'm doing enough thinking when I'm not watching TV.
But I think
Right.
that there's a danger in that, though. I think that the first 3 Alien films didn't. Yes, the second one was shiny and big, but it was also really deep and interesting and full of heart and everything. It's a film that if you love Jerry Bruckheimer films, you can go and watch Aliens and have a great time. And if you love my favorite word, cerebral science fiction, you can also watch and enjoy. It really works. So I don't think we have to sacrifice one thing for another. I mean, we're seeing that play out where they like, and I think the problem is that these last, or the challenges, the last few Alien films have been made by committee. Well, let's get this writer in here. Let's. What do you think? Okay, this is a great
That's
idea.
the thing with Aliens is that
this.
everyone could enjoy it. It's the
Yeah.
one movie, other than the first one, where you could be from any background, any type of movie, TV fan, and you hop in and enjoy it. Like all the great stuff Claire was talking about with Alien Covenant. It's like, I don't mean to be blunt, but most people don't give a shit about doing research when watching a movie. It's optional. Like, I like doing all the background stuff in Alien. You know me, I love, I'm a Prometheus nerd. I love reading all the theories and everything. But it's optional. It's not necessary for me to enjoy it. I choose to do it. You shouldn't, it's not something that should be required to enjoy a movie. Sometimes the weird stuff stands out in these other movies because we nitpicking them. The general public doesn't enjoy them as much as we do because they're not hardcore fans. So they see this stuff and they go, I don't like this. I'm going to make fun of this. I'm going to make fun of this line, because it doesn't connect the way the first 2 movies, arguably the third, do. Where Alien and Aliens, and now really Alien 3, just about anyone can turn on and just about anyone can enjoy, because they connect in some way, whether it's survivalism, mother-daughter, Discovery. All 3 of those have something to connect to, where the prequels, because they took chances, it's not that they just took chances, but the execution of them wasn't the best. It was very mixed. It was very inconsistent on both movies. And when you have that type of feel, it's going to grab certain people like me and not others. You know, you have people like me who love Prometheus, other people who love Covenant, others who hate both. You know, it crosses the streams, you know, through audience, whether it's us or just this normal family going in to watch a movie.
So I want to first off appreciate the Ghostbusters reference. Thank you, Dave. But I want to take a second. I want to backpedal for a minute, because I think this conversation is going in like not maybe the direction that I think I was kind of personally at least hoping it would go, because I feel like we're talking a lot about kind of industry concerns and about like, you know, what kind of platform this should be on, what kind of genre it should fit into. But I personally just curious more from an immediate standpoint on the story that we have at the end of Covenant, and where that could go as a narrative. Like, I'm not talking about if this is on a streaming service or if this is made for sort of popcorn entertainment. I mean, just from a story in terms of building on or building off of the themes that we're presented with this very divisive, very interesting, and very, for some people, off-putting vision that we're presented with in these 2 Ridley films since 2012. So for me personally, and I'll throw out my 2 cents here, I think that the key to like what I would like to see in a follow-up to Covenant is in the rest of the stanza of Ozymandias. So, so the part that David is mentioning goes, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." To me, that last bit about that barren wreck and the lone and level sands is where this needs to end, because the ultimate endpoint of any uncontrolled mutation, the ultimate endpoint of any spiraling creativity, the ultimate endpoint of unchecked hubris, right, is death, is destruction, is obliteration. To me, the only way to make this whole thing work, and that includes in terms of like, because I'm with Michael and everybody else who's mentioned this, that like I do not want this to dovetail perfectly into the xenomorph that we know. I don't want this to provide any answers that are real. I don't want this to make anything neat and tidy. I want this to end with a fucking explosion of absolutely monstrous proportions. And out of the ashes of that explosion, for something to be allowed to set into motion that we don't see, but that something comes out of this obliteration. And I think that like we're really kind of set up nicely for that with how Covenant ends. You know, you have David on this ship that is this like floating, you know, nightmare vessel, which I think, I mean, if we come out of that without getting the incredible body horror sequences that we're set up for, like I'm just so disappointed. I feel like
Yeah,
the
that's
ending of Covenant with the Wagner playing and with David having this complete open test tube
potential there
bodies,
is
right?
delicious.
And to me, the big disappointment with Covenant, which again, for anybody who isn't familiar with this, I fucking love Covenant. And the reason I'm even on Perfect Organism in the first place is because I was talking to Jaime about it so much. He's like, why don't you come on and talk about it? It's one of my favorite films. I do think, though, that I was let down by the fact that some of the incredibly terrifying shit that Dane and Matt and others drew was never realized in the film. I mean,
Yes,
I was so nervous, you know, before I saw the movie. I was like, I'm going to be fucked up by this film if I see these weird things that you know, this things that Dane was drawing, where you saw Shaw in this kind of liminal space between human and alien and biomech, and these kind of like these things that like I didn't really have like a vocabulary for internally. I was like, I'm going to be very, very afraid of this. When I saw Covenant, I was afraid in that I was terrified by some sequences, right? I was afraid in that there were some themes that were kind of under my skin, but I didn't get that sense of absolute horror, that grand guignol horror that I was kind of looking for. To me, this final chapter, if there is a final chapter in this, you know, presumed trilogy that I'm kind of talking about, I want to see it be basically this absolutely nightmarish descent into something almost like Suspiria, something that is just sort of like overwhelming to behold. And then I want that overwhelmingness to run itself out and to basically explode, to end with some sort of an enormous war between David and the engineers, to end with something, you know, completely out of control that sets off events that we don't see and that we don't get answers to, but that could somehow, through chains of time and causality and mutation, arrive at something like the actual Big Chap Xenomorph. But we would never get information on how that happened. To me, the only way this can end is death.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna join. I tell you what, Patrick, I'm gonna fill in from where you just stopped because I absolutely believe 100% agree with what you're saying. I would like to see. I would like to see it set up to where David takes the colonist in this ship and goes to Orgai 6. And then he's got this playground because we already know that this planet is set up like Earth. So he's got everything to do with it. And exactly like you said, we already have an idea. We already kind of got a glimpse at how the engineers work and how they steer their ship, and make them landing on LV 426 a whole nother thing. Just don't even go in that direction. You already know what's coming there. He explained that in Prometheus, and they gave you kind of an update. But I agree with you. I'm one of those ashes and fire and brimstone, and just like let him go crazy. You know, if you want to make, you know, Tennessee, and you want Shaw to be the ones that kind of run from him as he's doing all this kind of thing, is great. But like my big thing is I want somebody, Jaime, I mean, I've talked about this many times. What carried the original Alien movies for me was Ripley. Like I had that one person that continued the whole way through. You started with her in Alien, then you followed her in Aliens, and then Alien 3, and even Alien Resurrection. You had that person, and it was kind of rough for me because Shaw. I thought, oh, I could really make this could be the person I get behind, and she's gonna go through this, and she got through the first one. And then, it just sort of worked out the way it did. And then they just kind of cut her character off. And then we got, Tennessee, and you got Daniels. And I'm like, okay, here's another character. Let's see if we can pull behind. And they just weren't strong enough. But like you said, I'm almost at the point now for my dislike or, whatever it is for the android type characters. Just thinking of like David and him going to this planet with like, I mean, what is there? A couple thousand people that he can do whatever he wants to. Exactly. Let him go wild. Let him mess with things. Come up with all kinds of horrifying creatures, and so where you're gonna know where eventually it's gonna get to aliens, but it doesn't have to be him being the one that gets there. He can go off on his own, but I absolutely agree. I mean, it's got to have a conclusion, if nothing for the fans to finally be like, okay, I now see where you went with this, and I totally agree. And I think, put somebody in the seat that wants to be an Alien fan to get behind this, and make it crazy.
That's so key too, I think, really, like, as we're talking about, and to reference something that you said, Patrick, like, for me, I want someone who is as passionate about this franchise as we are doing the next film. Not someone who's like, yeah, I'm not sure about the Alien anymore. I don't want anybody who's not sure about the Alien directing an Alien film.
Yeah,
Period. I just think that's fatal for the next film. Fatal. If you're not interested in the Alien, then don't make an Alien film. However, one specific thing, there's the scene where at the end of Covenant, you see David, of course, retching up the little whatever those things are. I love the idea that if the ship crashes, for some reason those are gone, and though you have those, human fetuses there, and they've been somehow melded, but you can't tell. Like, there's so much potential right there of like horror, absolute
like an
horror,
Island of
where,
David Moreau type thing you could do.
yeah, where even if say it crashes, okay, just say the ship crashes, and just for whatever reason, say David doesn't really continue. Maybe he makes a cameo and he's all in pieces when the ship crashes, but Shaw wakes up or someone wakes up, it's a new character or whatever, and then they're like, okay, we're on this planet, we don't know where we are, but we need to get things going. This is where we are, we can't get the ship going again. So they start incubating these fetuses again, thinking everything's fine. Incubating these fetuses, the fetuses start to grow. All of a sudden, horror, everything seems fine. Much like that's sort of how Alien goes. What no one has seen the little egg or face hugger or whatever those were in there. Nobody knows until these babies are then done from the incubator and they're being raised and something starts happening. I mean, I think that would be a great way to set up a sequel, whether it involves David or not. Like, to me, that's where I go in my head in terms of like the horror that I miss, because we don't know what to expect. And that's what I want from an Alien film. I want to not expect what I am about to see.
I would go the other way. Sorry, you go first, Michael.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
I think I said this about like 2 years ago as well, but the way I wanted to see it go next is actually going back to Planet 4 before the Covenant arrives. I want to see how David and Shaw got to the planet. I want to see how all those abominations happened in the lab. I want to see Shaw getting infected by the pathogen and David operating her on her night after night, pulling out all of these abominations, and she's thinking that he's helping her, and he's just hoping, just out of all of that chaos comes something that he can create and make beautiful, but she doesn't survive that process. I want to see her trying to escape the engineers, being all like mutated and like monstrous and like really scary. I want to see her struggling for her life, because like she obviously survived having the trilobite taken out of her. I want to see her survive after she's had all of these monstrosities operated out of her, and her trying to leave that planet, turning on that beacon, saying, you know, someone come and fucking save me, because I'm stuck here on this planet with this fucking crazy robot, these mutated engineers, these monsters coming out of me. I want to see the mythology of Prometheus realized in Elizabeth Shaw, and I can definitely see, you know, Noomi Rapace coming back for that, Michael Fassbender coming back for that, Ian White coming back to reprise the engineer. You only need 3 actors. The rest of it's just practical effects. It can be done, and it would be so intense. You'd have this genuine feeling of fear, and it could take place over a day. It could take place over a month. Whatever it needs to do, I think it can be done, because it's so fucking scary what he could have come up with in that time. You can see with all of the drawings he's operated.
You were supposed to get a book of that too.
Yeah, he's operated on children, engineers, he's operated on babies, he's operated on all of these different animals on the planet. There's this like really rich biosphere that we've never got to see alive. what if we could see that and then see it fucked up Geiger style? I really want to see that.
Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the things in Covenant, I think we can all pretty much agree that was one of the greatest things that came out of Covenant was the backburster scene was something new. We had you never saw that before, and then the one that came out of his throat, like those two scenes in general were some of the greatest parts of that. It's like it just missed, so that if you can go further, but yeah, I agree with Clara. I mean, the books and stuff like gave you a taste of how cool it must have been, all the experimentation that he did, and to see.
Connor, you are a storyteller, a damn good one. What story would you tell?
Oh Christ. Okay. As much as I don't like what's been going on with the prequels, I have had a couple nights where I've thought about what would I do, where would I take it if I could. The main problem is it's a prequel, so in a certain way you're kind of limited to what you can do to reach the end of the story. You have to have a certain end to it to match up to whatever comes afterwards. But at the same time, it's difficult because people want this big massive battle between David and the engineers and whatnot. Okay, for one thing, that's not small budget. Don't know where you're going to get the money to do that. Where the franchise is now, I say why not set it way, way, way in the future, past every other movie, and have some or ship or something arrive on Orgai 6 way after David's done what he's done. Is he still alive? Who knows? But you get to see the full extent of what his creations can do. But at the same time, you're not completely limited by trying to bring it into the Ascian, the alien. The problem is as well that you could set it on the Covenant in, while it's heading there. So at the end of the day, okay, something happens on the ship, and at the end of the film, ship crashes, whatnot. Maybe you get another film out of it. The problem is that the way the Covenant's being written right now, it's the scope of what you can do is somewhat limited. There's not a lot of flexibility to play around with that as a writer. Like, personally, I would hate to write a sequel to Covenant because it's a complete goddamn headache where it's headed right now.
Interesting. I would love to write a sequel.
I think it's very interesting what you said because it clicked something to me. There was all this talk about Sigourney Weaver talking to Ridley Scott about being in the third prequel. And everyone was like, well, what is she going to play? Her younger self? But why would she? And blah, 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 blah. And if it was set like post-resurrection, she could play Ripley, getting to that planet with David still alive. There's no reason why David would have changed. He'd still be alive. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but I really like that concept you had there.
Patrick, you're a game guy. What about how cool would it be to see the Covenant almost like a la Dead Space?
Oh my god! Where
they kind of come on it, and it's just like they get there and open it up, and it's just like a nightmare. Like,
oh my god,
everything has been done for how many years? It's like the way Connor said, it would be awesome to see it actually behind a jump and see it in the future, and some small pirate ship of guys happen upon this thing, and here is what David has done. He's still involved in the system, somehow, and just dead, like that dead space where it's just necromorphs, but just craziness. I mean, that would be Connor hit. I just didn't think about it till Connor said that, but that would be an awesome.
Have it like Out of the Shadows, where David's actually the AI within the ship. Like, his body's obviously gone, but his mind is still controlling what's going on in the ship. You can manipulate it like the pyramid out of Alien vs. Predator.
And he could become basically the god of his own system, right?
Yeah.
Like he could transcend his corporeal.
He's free now that he no longer has his body.
Yeah, and he's lord of his own kingdom because that's like that's his ship.
That's his.
Michael, I love that idea of like a Dead Space thing. I mean, talk about a haunted house in space, right? That's like, in terms of, I mean, I don't know if like that feels like a full movie to me, but it totally could work. I feel like if it's really contained and it's really freaky. I guess something else that I want to bring up for you guys too to react to is that I guess something that I think Alien struggles with a little bit is that the first film came out of this very urgent need for O'Bannon to express something that he was afraid of, and something that he knew people like him were afraid of, right? So like a lot of the things that we kind of take for granted now, like a lot of the the rape things and the chest bursting and things, like all of these the birth fear things, like for audiences in the late 70s, that was very groundbreaking, very new, and that's part of why it was so kind of immediately freaky for people. And I think something that alien films struggle with a little bit is that I don't think they're necessarily trying to figure out exactly what people are afraid of in the moment in which they're being written. They're kind of riding off, they're kind of on still on the crest of that same wave of fear ideas. And something that I think could be cool that I would like to see. Like, I find Annihilation really frightening. I think that the writings of Jeff Vandermeer in general are really terrifying. And I think that
The writing is frightening. Sorry.
I think that they're Gold doesn't like the movie.
Sorry, allergy season. Sorry.
Allergy season.
Yeah.
It to me, it feels like it's the reason why I'm so intoxicated by those books is because they're hitting at something that I'm like really afraid of, that I don't even like know exactly what it is. It might be related to the fear of like getting cancer or something, right? Like just being afraid of that. But I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is that like we are all really afraid of the situation that we're in right now to varying degrees, and we've kind of become a little bit desensitized to it because it's been long enough. But we've all been living with some form of fear for quite a while now, whether it be our loved ones getting sick or whether it be losing our livelihoods or et cetera. There's a lot of fear out there. And I would really hope that whoever writes this next film or this next treatment or whatever this is, like takes into account what people are actually afraid of right now. And I don't know if that necessarily means contagion or it necessarily means sort of an unseen pandemic or something. But I think audiences are kind of used to the ideas that were present in the original Alien film. And I think that that's not to say the beast is cooked, obviously, because I don't think he's even close to that. But I do think that the beast has to be frightening in ways that we're not necessarily ready for. They're not really prepared for. And I think the way you get back to doing that is by finding what will actually freak people out and by going really hard in that direction and using that as a basis for fear, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, again, for me, Jump Street is finding a James Cameron that's not a Neil Blomkamp. Someone who's like, who has the sensibilities of Christopher Nolan, who's big summer action blockbuster, yet entirely deep and layered. And you can keep watching his films over and over and get something new every time. I mean, he's a golden child. There's no one else like him, except for maybe Spielberg, which his films, even during the time, were more summer blockbuster than they were heady discussion piece. Not that the Alien films need to be that, but I think they spawn that. You can talk about the first Alien and Aliens and Alien 3 ad nauseum. There's so much there. There's so much to discuss, and even the films that aren't successful, like Resurrection, there's still a lot to talk about there. There's a lot of possibilities there, but I feel like you have to find someone who is passionate. You have to find a storyteller. And one thing I want to reference is, I think we all know that Universal was trying to reboot their dark stories. What's the term again?
Dark Universe.
Dark Universe, yes. And so they tried it with The Wolfman, flopped. They tried it with The Mummy, most recently. It completely flopped. And what other film? I think there was one more.
Invisible Man.
No, that's the reboot.
Wasn't there was a Dracula, right?
Yeah,
Dracula.
Oh, there was Dracula Untold, right?
Yeah.
Which was not made for that series, but was retconned to be fitted.
Yeah, it was totally
different. Yeah, right.
But what Universal
Invisible Man was actually very good, though.
No, it was. It was awesome.
Oh, yeah, we're getting to that.
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So what Universal decided to do was because they had flops. I mean, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on these films and they flopped. They decided to go back to the auteur, and so they licensed essentially the Invisible Man and gave it to Jason Blum, right? Or Blumhouse or whatever.
Well, he didn't make it, but he produced it.
He's produced it, and he, him and the filmmakers involved, they wrote the story. They were passionate about it. The film launched. And it made a ton of money. Eventually left theaters early because of the pandemic. But even before it did, it was making a ton of money. and Universal thought, we need to go back and give this franchise or give these stories, these IPs to people who have stories to tell. And it worked. For the first one, it really, really worked. And it did really well. And I feel like if Fox or if 20th Century Films / Disney does what they have always done with these movies again, we're going to be in the exact same boat. We're going to be in the exact same boat. We're going to have people who are like, yeah, it's great. It's not going to make a lot of money in the theater. Or I think, of course, Prometheus did turn it. It did turn a budget. It really did. But the studio was also saying it could have made more money for the money that they invested in it. They wanted something a little bit different. And for whatever reason, they pulled out of the sky that people wanted the alien in the Alien movie. So then, even though Ridley Scott wasn't involved, you guys know the story. They threw him into Covenant, blah, 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 blah. I just really feel like if they don't turn this IP over to an auteur, someone with a story to tell, someone with passion, someone who's been like, I've been wanting to tell the story all of my life, I don't know if we're going to have any different conversations than the ones that we're having now.
But those people are not usually the people who get to do this.
That's true. That's very true. It's a risk, like you were saying. It's a risk. It's about taking a risk, and I don't really know. In light of seeing more from Blomkamp in terms of some of the conceptual designs, I think the last conceptual design that I saw, and I'm someone who was championing his film, I saw whatever millipede xenomorph, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, I just off that one still, I was like, we dodged a bullet with this movie. Like, what were you even doing?
Yeah,
And
it had
then,
like eight arms or something, right?
yeah, yeah, and I mean, as someone who was a fan of District 9 and loved portions of some of his aesthetics from Elysium, man has a problem telling a story. He really does. We don't need that in this universe anymore.
He does love adding extra arms onto things. I've noticed that.
But we just, but I think that you can take that risk to Andrew's point. Like, they took a risk with Invisible Man, saying, hey, someone sort of took a spin on that story, and instead of a man who was becoming invisible, spoiler alert for anyone, it was
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I won't say it.
I think that what we're going to see with Disney in charge now is we're either going to see either we're going to get James Cameron, we're going to get somebody like, all right, let's go back to somebody we trust, and it'll be Ridley producing and James directing or something like that. Okay. Or it's going to be one of the guys responsible for Marvel and The Mandalorian. You know what I mean? It's gonna be somebody, either somebody they really trust or somebody that's really tied to it. And I think that part of the problem, and that you're seeing in all this Hollywood stuff, in a lot of ways, the problem is that they're being reactionary also. It's like Prometheus, while it did really well, a lot of the fans hated it. And like financially it did very well. But a lot of the fans hated it. And so what was supposed to be the sequel was scrapped. Like Ridley changed all this stuff. And then in the end, Shaw was, a dead body of it. And it's like, that was to appease people. And then, he said the beast was cooked. And then all these people
before the film came out,
there was no alien, so he's like, all right, I'll put it back in. But it feels like, to me, the worst thing in the movie. Like, I think that movie works better without the actual alien in it. Like, I would have rather
neomorphs.
I would have seen
neomorphs were cool as shit.
Further from the neomorph, I would have loved to have seen like a different almost alien, not the alien.
Yeah.
So it's like they're afraid they're not going to make money. Is what it comes down to. I mean, a lot of what's in Rise of Skywalker was also reactionary. And would it have been better the other way? I don't know, but I think it used to be we would get this vision, we'd stick to it, and you know what, you're going to deal with it. And I wonder if the whole prequel trilogy would have been better if he had just stuck to his guns.
That's what I've said, 100%.
So.
Well, here's a question to pose to everybody then. Should Ridley Scott be the director or the producer for the next film?
Producer. Let him just oversee it, because he's still a visual genius. But in my opinion, in terms of his choices, sometimes with story, especially writing, just hands off. hands off. He's still visually fantastic. He still has an eye for the genre, but hands off everything else. That's it.
I think
That's
we're
what
going to
I
wind
see
up
the rest.
seeing him get a chance to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think so.
And then I think what's going to happen is either we're going to get trapped in things like Hadley's Hope, which I would rather they not, just like Clara, or we're going to do what I would rather they do, and I think they're going to do is we're just going to say, okay, 300 years in the future, everything you've seen before is past history to what's happening now, and that's that was talked about by Fox before the merger. But they were always planning. Again, this is before Covenant, came out and they knew the numbers and everything. But they were always planning on letting Ridley finish his trilogy at least. If the movies did really well, Ridley was talking about making it 4 or 5 movies instead. But they were always talking about at least letting him finish his trilogy.
What's crazy is that there was a time where he was saying up to 7 movies, that he had enough vision for 7 movies. What the fuck were those going to be about? Like, oh my God. And that's the thing too. You watch, the Furious Gods, Charles's astounding documentary on the making of Prometheus, which I enjoy 4 times as much as I enjoy Prometheus, and when I watch more than I watched Prometheus. And you see the Ridley Scott that I would love to see direct a 3rd prequel film. You see a guy who is on fire with ideas, a guy who has so much passion, a guy who can't stop sketching because he can't get his words out fast enough and he just has to start drawing. I mean, you see Ridley in his absolute creative sweet spot, the sweet spot that gave us Blade Runner, the sweet spot that gave us the original Alien film. You see like Ridley Scott at the helm of a sci-fi project. Somehow, probably because of studio pressures, although of course we know from speaking with Fox about this that like they kind of let him do what he wants, but at the same time, Covenant went in a direction that I think wasn't the direction that he had hoped it would be, as we know. And so I think that probably put him off a little bit, and he probably made more concessions than he would have wanted to. And I don't know if he would still fight for getting this next film made. But if he were to fight for it to get made, and if he did have his finger on what his real story was that he wanted to tell, then I would love to see him direct it again. He is not my favorite director for this franchise. I don't think he's the best director for the role at this point in time. But I do think that when given the ability to see his vision through the way that he really sees it, I think that there is like a list of maybe 5 directors in the entire last 100 years of filmmaking that have the talent that Ridley Scott has. And I think if we had the chance to set him up to show us that one last time before he's 90 years old, you know what I mean? Like that would be pretty amazing. But I also think though, and this is a point I just want to make before, and then I want to get right back to this question flow because I do want to hear what everybody else has to say too. But just before I forget, going back to what people are afraid of, you were talking about James Cameron, Jamie, who I agree was just this wonderkind who's kind of a once in a million chance that was incredible. Part of why Aliens worked so well for the time is because it was addressing a fear that I don't think people realized they had, right? It was addressing this fear that capitalism was doing something to us, that this unchained marketplace in the mid-1980s was going to basically go off the rails and reveal things about human nature that we weren't ready to see yet. And you see that nowhere else more strongly than on that commemorative, it's not commemorative, it was the Time magazine that came out the week of the release of Aliens, that has Sigourney Weaver and the Queen on the cover, and then at the top it says literally "Capitalism Unchained" as like the headline, and it's just this sort of like that is what people were actually fearing at the time. And I think that like if Ridley can get out of his need to sort of prove this philosophical point with creation, although I love it, and get back to like what people are actually afraid of right now and make a film about that with writers who really understand that, then I think it could be great. But my choice is Alex White. I will shut up now. Not Alex White. I would like Alex White to be a creative consultant on it, but Alex Garland is the Alex that I'm thinking of. Although, hey, Alex White can take it too. Anyway, other people, what do you think? Should Ridley be directing this final installment or producing it?
I say produce. And maybe take some up and coming director under his wing and show him the Ridley way.
Do you think? I mean, do we think that he would? Do we think he would step back and allow somebody else to have, a little bit more control? That's the only thing. That's what worried me. But I absolutely agree. I'd let him produce it and put his ideas into the mix and get an up and coming director and hopefully maybe he pushes somebody down the road that becomes something special. But I absolutely think I would like to see him finish it. I mean, I think he deserves that much.
I'm going to be the dick and say produce completely hands off the story completely. If he was to take somebody under his wing, even then I'd be hesitant because at the same time he could influence the way they would like the story to be portrayed or whatnot. Go ahead with it, but at the same time, I kind of want them to restart things from a fresh start and go plunder the extended universe. Get the stories from the comics or the novels, not bits and pieces of them though, because we've seen that in things like the DC universe with taking bits and pieces from certain comics and piece them together, and it's never worked. Like the full story, Cold Forge, Phalanx, Labyrinth. You've got plenty of stories there that would do well, and you don't even have to edit them in there anyway. You just need to adapt them. That's it.
Labyrinth would be the greatest fucking Netflix series I've ever, or HBO miniseries. Give me a fucking 4-part Labyrinth series, and I will
With Mike
pay.
Flanagan directing.
Oh,
Oh man, that'd be great. I would love to
Yes.
see that.
that would be awesome.
Garland's too highbrow for the general public.
It should be Garland.
I hate to like, again, be like, bring everybody down. But the reality of this is that that'll never happen. They will never take a comic based on a movie and turn it into a movie. They won't do that because then they have to pay these people something that they don't want to. It's different when it's a franchise that started as a comic book and becomes a movie. That's different. But if it's a movie that was based on a comic that was based on a movie, now becomes a movie that became a novel that became, they won't do it. They won't do it. Which is sad because a lot of good stories come out of those things. But you will see them, like you said, and you will see them mined for ideas. So, if anybody can name a single instance when this has been done, I'd be really impressed because I can't.
I'm trying to think of one right now. I'm thinking. I feel like it might have happened with Buffy stuff at some point.
Well, I mean, who was writing that? It was John. It was
the same. It was the guy who was writing the show too, right?
Yeah. So that's not the same thing. That doesn't count.
Yeah.
Because it was all his in the first place.
I'm just wary of repeating things that we've seen before in terms of setting it on a ship or Sevastopol. Really, Isolation's really explored that. I don't want to see a movie version of Isolation. I don't want to see another Ripley named Ripley, Amanda Ripley's daughter. That is so boring to me. That is so like, let's move on from her. Let's move on from her. But let's talk about the company. I think Michael, you were talking about, or somebody was saying something, how many ideas there are in terms of who is this company. Let's lift the veil on them.
You can do a
just
Wayland
a little bit,
Chronicles.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to explore, and get away from sort of the essentially Ripley is the legacy character, and also the legacy setting of Derelict. Ridley Scott's directed 3 films where they explore Derelict and they find something and things go wrong. We've seen it 3 times now. Let's set an alien film, even the sequel to Covenant, where it crashes on a planet. I don't know what that planet would be a little bit different, where it doesn't involve another Juggernaut or Derelict, where it's a completely fresh take, where it's not in a ship, it's or it's not on a prison colony. Not that we've seen that before, but we've just seen and even Covenant, sort of the last part of it is on a ship and they blow the thing out, and it's the same thing that we've seen before. Do something else. That's for me. And just because you, like Dave might say, you do something different doesn't mean it's going to be good. But I really do think that we've exhausted all of the tropes that we've seen. We've exhausted them. That's why Orem getting a face hugger was like, really? Because we've exhausted it. And I think if whoever is going to do it, well, even if it's Ridley, like, I would completely agree that Ridley Scott took a lot of risks in Covenant with the David Walter thing and the whole, what was happening between the robots or the androids or whatever. I think it was risky. Everyone didn't love it. It was, some people were like, what it was, but he was taking a risk, and it is what it is. But I would probably rather him or someone take a risk like that than to do another Force Awakens of the Alien series. Like they've been trying to do that since Alien Resurrection, and then they, and it just hasn't worked. And everything, the film that was the most successful was also the most similar, which was Prometheus, in terms of the films of the last, ever since Alien Resurrection. I can't belabor enough that I really think they need to do something completely different.
In this case, I agree with you. I think branching out it's time. I mean, we don't need everything to tie together anymore. It's like Andrew was saying, and which is something I've hoped. I mean, hell, you've heard me argue before that the prequels would work better as sequels if they were set in the future. It's time. Set it 200-300 years in the future, new stories, maybe have, mentions here or there of what happened then. That's it. Everything brand new. I think it's the way to go. A soft reboot, if you will.
One of the things that, if you look at the Star Trek movies that came out, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, it's like, if you look at them, they're a boiled down checklist of what the general public thinks.
Fucking hate those movies so much.
I'm not arguing with you at all, but I'm just saying it's like, Beam Me Up, Scotty, Yellow Shirts. It's like it's a checklist of what the general population, who's briefly seen as, in passing, someone flipping the channels on Star Trek, thinks Star Trek is, and that's because that is what has lasted iconically from that property. And that's what all these movies are trying to do, not just Alien, but Star Wars and everything. They're like, how do we capture that again? That's why, it's another desert planet. Oh, it's another Death Star. Oh, it's another this. They don't know how to capture, they don't know how to do an Empire Strikes Back. That's what it comes down to. Empire Strikes Back was not a duplicate of Star Wars in any way, shape, or form. It literally brought the story into new territory. And look, again, I'm probably people are going to hate me for this, but even look at Aliens, okay? It has the same beats as Alien. It literally does.
Oh, I wonder where we heard that before, Patrick.
Patrick, you said this before?
No, I did. I've gone over this before.
You have.
Yeah, this has come up.
It's like even Cameron even did it, and he was smart to do it. It's just that they're making movies is expensive, and they keep inflating the costs of these things and making things cost more and more money, when in a lot of cases I don't think they need to. I mean, what happened with the Joker movie is proof that you can make a huge hit with spending no money on something. And honestly, can't we, if we can do 10 episodes of Picard for 75 million at the most, whatever it was, we can't do an Alien movie for that much,
And that series was terrible.
Well, that's a
Well, Dave, you and I talked about this the other day too, and talking about how we can bring back into the series, but do something totally different from what it is right now. We were talking about, I don't remember if it was 2 years ago on Alien Day, they released the little sketches, and it was like what was going on Weyland-Yutani behind the scenes. They had the one with all the aliens in the test tubes, and the scientists looking at them, and then they had the ones where like the facehuggers were being unleashed on a planet. Like,
oh my God, I forgot about those things.
Yeah, those.
Holy shit!
It just never really came out of something. I'm thinking, how great would it be to have it be opposite? So have the bad guys be the main set, and then you have your good guy that's kind of the spy, the guy that gets into, the guy that sees what's going on, and take it in a different direction, pull people away from it, and then maybe eventually down the road go back into the normal routine. But even like Clara said, like you could easily make that like an animated, or anime or something like that, make an awesome series out of that. It would be incredible, because it's a media that this franchise hasn't been in before. Like I said, what I fell in love with is the comic books. If I could get to see something like that was a live, not live, but an animated, basically animated comic book, that would be incredible. I mean, that was such a cool idea.
And if you're gonna, repeat beats, do it in a way that's traditionally. Aliens, obviously, like you guys have said, it does a similar path that Alien did, but it told the story and introduced new things that weren't there in Alien. So if you're going to do it, you need to do it in a fresh manner, not just lazily throw taglines and quotes and sequences from previous movies, do it in a way that's fresh. If you want to keep the same sort of story to keep like the theme of the franchise, that's fine, but don't keep telling the same fucking story. Introduce new things. Cameron brought the Hive, the warrior aliens, the Queen, the Marines. There's thousands of new, 100,000. There's dozens of new ideas in there, just following a similar path. So if you're gonna, at least mix it up and be the same, I don't know. I'm just talking out my ass, but you get the idea.
Well, if I see one more alien sucked out of a goddamn spaceship, I'm gonna lose it. I swear to Christ.
You just throw the popcorn and walk out of the movie.
Yep,
Honestly,
I'm
can you imagine?
be done.
Can you imagine if this this Covenant third film ends with there's like a beacon and it turns out it's actually from Earth, and like they steer the Covenant down and it's fucking like Ellen Ripley like as a child like pressing something, and it's like because they're trying to get to that.
They call her
I'd
Ellie.
like to argue that.
Ellie.
Are you out there?
Like everyone's saying, obviously, we want to avoid doing all these tropes and whatnot. But you take the tropes like blowing the alien out of the airlock, somebody getting the face hugged, the typical fucking xenomorph head bite where you see the whole thing's face in the camera. There's 10 different ways you could do every one of those scenarios that we've not seen yet. You just have to, as Andrew says, not treat it like a checklist.
I do think it's interesting, and I know that this film is controversial for some people, Patrick, like Joker, but Joker is a film that they essentially made this film that was like, well, what is this movie? And they turned it on its head, and the movie was so successful. And I'm not saying that you can use the same approach Alien the same way, because it's a very different sorry, hold on, I was getting a phone call. Alien's a very different property for sure. You can't just approach Alien like you approach a DC property. You can't. But they took a huge risk with Joker, and it paid off in spades. And it was a very slow moving, deep, intense film. Yes, and people went to that film in droves.
Beautiful all around.
Yeah, and it's not a film that it almost throws on its head some of the stuff that we've been discussing. Like, you don't need the shiny new things, because audiences are smart. And I think, I think it's just a sweet spot, and you got to find it, and you got to know what works, and you got to know who to take a risk with. You got to know what story is the right story. And oftentimes studio execs don't know what the right story is. They think they do, but they don't. They think, well, what worked here? Let's try that. That's not how you tell a story. So making films is already very, very difficult. I think when we see films that are really great, it's surprising because it's hard to make a good film. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. That's why you need someone in charge who knows what that is, who knows what a good story is, who can read a script and think, this is it. We can work on a little bit more, but this is it. As opposed to, well, why don't you give it to him and see what he comes up with next? I sort of like that. Why don't we go off with this idea? That's not how you tell a story. But I mean, that's also a cyclical conversation.
But again, the thing with Joker, which my feelings on that film, I'm not going to get into that. But the reason why I think it did so incredibly well is because it was tapping into something in the zeitgeist. It was tapping into things people were afraid of. It was tapping into things people wanted to talk about. It's really easy to get word of mouth advertising if you make a film that slots into something somebody was like looking for a way to discuss, or something that somebody was something that somebody's already kind of burning to get into, to talk about. If you make a movie that speaks to that, then people are going to talk about it and people are going to go see it. And that's why if you look at the box office returns on Joker, it had a really steady rise week after week, right? For an R-rated film to have that is pretty astounding. And it was because people were talking about it. It was because everybody had something to say. Everybody had an opinion, whether they liked it or not. Everybody had something to say about it. Invisible Man, likewise, right? Another kind of unlikely R-rated hit that week after week was consistently making more money. It was talking about things that were exactly what we are already trying to talk about. It was already addressing those fears and those things in society that we're having issues with. And it speaks to that. And that's why it's done so well for itself. So I think there's definitely an aspect of needing a storyteller who's burning to tell a story. But I think it's also having a storyteller who understands the stories audiences are looking to tell themselves too, And it's really fucking hard to do that. It's really hard to understand the milieu well enough to know how to write something that addresses it. But that's where brilliant filmmakers come in. And that's why we depend on people who can do that to make franchise decisions that push things in that direction. But I do have to say that we just rewatched the original Star Wars trilogy with the kids, which to this day is still like, as a lifelong Star Wars nut, those are the movies that to me that's what Star Wars is. I even though I do love, for the most part, the sequels too. Like the original trilogy is really it. And the kids now are old enough where we can watch it and they can actually sit down and we can like really talk about it. Especially our 6-year-old who's like just head over heels with it, and we can really discuss it. So rewatching them from the beginning, over this last week has been really fun. And I am just, like Andrew was saying before, just astounded at the leaps that each one takes building off of the previous one, and how different they are, and how much you really have to be on your toes to understand what's going on, even though they're made ostensibly for young people. Like George, that was something that George Lucas said all the time, is that they're made for young people, right? Like, and so even though they're complicated and there's a lot you have to pay attention to, they're very followable. And they're like that in spite of the fact that the structures are very different and that the amount of things going on are very different. And I can't fathom how you could do that with an Alien movie, but I would love to see somebody create, the Empire for, well, I guess in this case it would be the Return of the Jedi for this sequel trilogy and or prequel trilogy, and I just don't know what that would be. But I do have to say, as we wrap,
we don't want Ewoks.
No. I was trying to explain that actually to my wife tonight, because we were watching RTJ tonight, and she was like, "People didn't like the Ewoks," and I was like, "Yeah, that was like that was the original, kind of angry Star Wars fan moment was the Ewoks." And it's funny because you watch it now and it seems like, like they're so lovable and they're fine, but I do kind of get it. Yeah, so no Ewoks in this movie. I do want to say as we wrap though that if there's anything evidenced by this discussion tonight, it is that there is no absence of ideas in fandom. There is no anemia going on here in terms of what can happen when people come together with something they love and they try to create something new with it. And this energy is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, regardless of where the studio is, regardless of where the finances are, regardless of whether or not Ridley Scott is involved. There are stories burning to be told in this fandom and in this franchise. And getting to hear some of these things, like Connor, your idea was brilliant tonight about sidestepping continuity and going all the way into the future. I loved that. I loved Mike's suggestion that there is a real appetite right now for a blockbuster film, and that could be something that could do really well too. I love all of the different things that have come out tonight, and it's really just reconvinced me, not that I needed to be, that we have so many great ideas in this fandom, and that I really hope that we see at least some of these come to fruition someday, because it's worth it. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being on. There's so much more that we could talk about. I think there's so many possibilities. And but I also want to say, as I close this, I really do feel like the Alien fandom has come a long way, and we can sit here and talk and not be crazy, not so about our opinions, or about, like we have to be right. And that's a rare thing in fandom these days. It just really is. So I want to sort of shout out to everybody and thank you for being available and being kind and being just being able to listen. Thank you, Dave.
Being awesome. Yeah,
being awesome. Yes.
Or
I know
I don't know about the rest of you.
This was a good time. I think Jamie, Patrick, you guys should come up with some kind of like a podcast that like we can all talk about this and get together and figure this out. And that would be an awesome idea.
They'd be
to do.
good.
You guys would be really good at this.
It'll never happen. It'll never happen.
Something that sounds like Perfect Orgasm, but it's like not quite, but it's like close enough people will talk about it.
I see what you did there.
Almost like a story group. We should have like a story group, ongoing live story group podcast or something for Alien. I don't know. But at any rate, thank you guys so much. This will be available for everyone to download and listen to. Thank you, Dave. Everyone check out The Hive Mind, which is Xenomorphing's podcast.
Brand new,
yes.
The Alien Fandom Podcast Universe.
Thanks for having me, guys. And
thank you, Andrew.
Everybody, pick up this fucking RPG because it is incredible. And in addition to obviously Andrew being behind, an enormous amount of this work, Clara also was involved with this.
Yeah, she has a
many
podcast
ways.
with a playthrough.
Woohoo!
Check it out.
Go, Clara.
She does.
Yeah.
And I know Clara
Check
is
out her
looking to
playthroughs.
GM some games as well as I am. And actually, I've been playing it with my cousin a lot, and I'm excited because we're going to be living closer together soon, and we already have game nights planned. So we'll probably be inviting some of you guys virtually to join us for those.
Yeah. Oh my God, that'll be amazing.
Right?
I haven't played yet, so you got to break my cherry.
Yeah. I haven't played it either.
Anytime, Dave.
I'm already preparing for my own game, which is going to be on this weekend.
Make my chest burst, Patrick.
And this is a rare opportunity to see Dave Gogol in full. There.
Clara, I love that you just pulled out your crazy person.
Apologize to you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Connor, for staying up so late. What time is it? Like almost 4 a.m. in the morning for Connor right now in Scotland.
Yeah, but I never sleep.
And he's got a brand new child that he also.
Yeah, so he doesn't
Are
sleep
you in
anyway.
quarantine right now, though, Connor? Are you in quarantine?
No, I'm back at work.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? So
They
Connor
called me
haven't
the next
stopped
day and
working.
asked me to return to work.
Me neither.
Someone
Yeah.
tested positive, right, at your
Yeah.
job.
And just briefly, that's kind of funny what Patrick was talking about, the whole capitalist thing, is put somebody in a position where you're financially risking their family's life. That's a scary situation.
Hey, absolutely,
Isn't
man.
it? That's. I mean, like being, right now, my wife is just finishing school right now, and we're a single income household in the midst of this, and I'm like, we are really hinging on not losing our livelihood during this because I don't know what would happen, right? Like that's a lot of people are feeling that pressure right now, and it's super scary. Stay safe, Connor.
Oh, Patrick, I took you out of the system today. I got an email from your company to remove you from our access.
Did you? Thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, for people who forgot, Mike is literally the person in charge of that. He runs security for the building that I work in. So you cannot do that, Mike. I know where
done.
you live.
So when can I move into that apartment, Mike?
It'll be available soon.
All right, cool. Let me know.
All right, guys. I'm going to end this.
guys.
Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you back here soon.
Bye.
Stay safe,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Rock.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye,
safe.
everybody.
Wash your
Bye, you
hands.
too.
Don't touch your face.
For more information on Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, please go to www.perfectorganism.com. If you'd like to become a supporter, please go to www.perfectorganism.com/support.